Hello and welcome to Season 4, Episode 41 of Logicast, the AWS News podcast brought to you by Logicata. I'm Carl Robinson, CEO and co-founder of Logicata, and I'm joined today, as always, back from a whole week of holidays, and I don't know how many holidays he gets. I'm sure somebody should be tracking that somewhere in some sort of system. I'm sure he's taking more than he should. But back from a whole week of holidays is lead cloud engineer John Goodall. How are you doing today, John?
I need
Nice
a
and refreshed?
holiday. I need a
Oh,
holiday.
yeah. Another
It was
one.
it was a running joke a number of jobs ago now, admittedly, was that you needed a day off to recover from coming back from a week off.
Yeah, that first day back is always a bit of a nightmare. The mountain of emails, Slack messages, and God knows what other sort of alerts and notifications you need to wade through.
Yeah, we're not too bad around here, to be fair. We're not too bad. And it wasn't a full week because we had the user group and I worked the afternoon of that to do prep for that and, a bit of what I call seagull management, which for the listeners that are unaware, it's you flap in, squawk at everybody, shit on everything and flap out again.
Well, there we go. Yeah. Hopefully that's educational for some of our listeners. They have now heard the phrase. But on that note, I'd like to introduce our guest for today, Fabien Zouchet, fellow AWS community builder. How are you doing today, Fabien?
I'm doing great. Thanks for the invite. I'm so happy to be here. So just a little bit about myself. I'm fairly new to AWS. Started playing with AWS around 4 years ago. It's my first year as a community builder as well. So what I do for a living is I'm work as a cloud architect at Theodo. So mainly building and migrating some cloud applications, mostly in serverless as well. So that's fairly AWS heavy. But yeah, on top of that, in the community, what I like to do is I've given a few talks, especially around what I like to do is look at how car manufacturing, like Toyota, produce their car and see what we can learn from that while building software. That's very interesting. So I might talk to you about lean and stuff in this
Yeah,
episode.
Toyota's the
It doesn't
poster
bother you.
child for lean, isn't it? Toyota's absolutely the poster child for that.
Well, we'll see if we can squeeze that in somewhere. So, as a cloud architect, Fabien, are you multi-cloud? Are you cloud agnostic, or are you 100% AWS?
So I started more as kind of site reliability engineer, so working a lot with Terraform and multi-cloud. When I moved as a cloud architect now, I'm really focused on serverless. So it is mostly working with AWS. Our I would say classic stack would be some TypeScript CDK and TypeScript Lambda functions and all the serverless bunch going around it.
Well, as regular listeners to the podcast will know, we are here to talk about AWS, not other cloud providers, although other cloud providers are available. We will only be talking about AWS, but Azure may get a special mention when we talk about outages, because, of course, they had one too. As regular listeners to the podcast will know, once a week I curate a list of AWS news, which I share via my weekly AWS News Roundup newsletter. And then John, normally John, actually, but because he was on holiday again, I did this selection of articles.
What do you mean again? The last time you did the picks is because I was busy with my burgeoning speaking career, which I've now kind of put on hiatus for the year.
I've struck a nerve here, haven't I? I've struck a nerve. I'll stop with the holiday abuse. Anyway, this week
3 weeks off all year.
So you say, yeah. Lucky nobody's counting. So I have shared a list of articles with both John and Fabien ahead of the weekend. And the first of those articles is serverless. So should play to both John and Fabien's strengths. This is a new feature announcement for AWS Lambda. And the AWS Lambda maximum payload size has increased from 256 kilobytes to 1 megabyte for asynchronous invocations. So, John, as a serverless community builder, is this something that is getting you incredibly excited?
No, I don't care.
You're only excited about holidays now, aren't you? That's
holidays and karate tournaments. Yeah. No, I mean, I've never personally, if you'd said Step Functions has increased its payload limit, I'd get quite happy about that, quite excited about that. But I've never personally had a problem with Lambda payload sizes. I can imagine scenarios where you would, right? Because I've written Lambdas and things before where you do things like thumbnail generation, and images can be multiple megabytes, and having big payloads for that would be quite handy, because then you can pass in things directly rather than having to grab things out of S3. But this doesn't affect how much data the Lambda can actually play with. It only affects how much you can give it in the first instance. And what are you doing that's using a whole megabyte of text input? Seriously, anything short of base 64 encoding an image, I think I would struggle to fill that up. I struggled to fill 256K, and this admittedly makes me sound like a COBOL programmer from the 70s, but I don't. It's great that they've done it. I'm sure there's someone out there that's very happy about this, and yes, you can send more things to it, and I think they did it for sync invocations as well, and they're just kind of aligning them at this point. But I don't care. Maybe it's an AI thing, and you need to be able to pass in much larger prompts to your LLMs, and maybe that's the thing. I don't know, but still, a full megabyte of text is a lot of text.
What about you, Fabien? Are you excited about this one, or?
I mean, not really. But I kind of feel concerned. Like, I can confirm, like, it is linked to like the AI stuff. That the only reason, like, the only time where I had actually like an issue with like the 256 kilobytes limits was like to do some LLM stuff, just because like I had more context. The reason why I'm not excited about it is like in all like the event-driven serverless architecture, you're not only like working with Lambda functions, you still got like, I think SQS now also has got like a 1 megabytes limit, so that's fine. But like if you're using like SNS, for instance, or even like EventBridge, I think, and maybe even like Step Function, you're still stuck to like the old limits. So that's not the best. And also another thing as well, I think that's could be an issue is like, yeah, you can go to 1 megabyte, but like if you need like large prompts, there's a chance you might go over like 1 megabyte. So you need to have a mechanism to basically solve that issue if need be. So that's better for like an LM, but I don't think that's going to change my daily job for sure.
It's solving a problem, but I don't know that it's a problem that people hadn't already solved, because the solution to this is the same, right? The solution to I've gone over 256K is going to be the same as the solution to I need to send more than a meg, which is you send a pointer to a reference somewhere else and you go get it. You get it from Dynamo, you get it from S3, you get it from Prompt Manager, you get it from wherever, right? So was this engineering for the sake of it? Was this someone trying to find a bonus reason? Someone just like there's a KPI that somebody needed to hit. Did somebody ask for this? And I know we've been told before 90-something% of innovations at AWS are because they were listening to customers and people have asked for it. So I assume someone's asked for this somewhere, and several someone's have asked for it, because again, you know, it's one of those things that it's very rarely likely to be one large customer. It's going to be lots of customers that ask for something. Cool. I do take issue with how they're billing this, to be honest, because that seems a bit nasty. So it says it at the end of the article. Calling it article is a bit generous, but it says it at the end of the announcement. Customers are charged for one request per invocation for the first 256K, which is fine because that's what you're paying for before. Beyond that, you are charged for one request per chunk of 64K up
That's
to
a
the
lot of
full
money.
megabyte, which all of a sudden means that going over by a little bit, so you go over by 10K, and you've paid for two requests. I haven't done the maths off the top of my head, but if you want to go up, it's what, 8-to-1, I think, you're going to pay huge numbers of requests just to get up to a decent size payload. And really, honestly, okay, Lambda invocations are really cheap, but it just feels nasty. I don't get it. If it was one per 256K chunk, I could live with that. I think that would be fair. But splitting it down that far just feels iffy.
What are your thoughts on that, Fabien? The pricing model.
Yeah, that's also like something that surprised me like a lot. Like, yeah, you could pay like up to like, what is it, like 13 times the price that you would normally pay. And the worst thing is now, because it's the new default, like if you don't pay attention, like you can go over like the 256 and just like double your bill in like without even noticing. But I think that's also like linked to another question as well, is it's not because like you could have like one bag of like payload that you should. And if you're working with events, I mean, in my experience, having large events is really not a good idea, because if you're doing like any kind of like event-driven system, it's just going to be like a pain to evolve and have like a proper life cycle of your events. So that's something I'm a bit wary about, is like there might be like setting like the future application being built to not failure, but like having some issues with like massive couplings and no separation of concerns, not versioning coupled with events and all of that. And that's something where like at least when you were hitting like the 256 kilobyte limit, which is already a lot of text, you were like, okay, maybe I'm doing something wrong.
So I need to know, slight tangent, but did you work out the 13 times in your head? Have you got an amazingly impressive mental arithmetic? Because I actually got my calculator out to work that out, and I got to the 12 plus the initial invocation. So 13 was absolutely spot on. But I was just wondering if you'd worked that out in advance, or did your head just get
I
there
did work that
that
out in
quickly?
advance, I think. Yeah.
Oh, phew.
Yeah,
I was
I've been
feeling so
prepping a bit.
inferior then from a mental arithmetic perspective, that I had to actually use my old school calculator to
That is
to
very
work
old
that one
school
out. So
too. It's
I
not
love
even
an
your
old school
phone.
calculator. Yeah, it's not even scientific. It's like an old school calculator.
Oh,
Thing is,
I've got an old
to use my calculator, I don't have to unlock my phone and launch the calculator app. I just get my calculator and it's ready to calculate.
Much more efficient.
So much easier. It's always there, ready to calculate.
With a very old solar panel cell on it too, which is really cool.
Yeah, never had
I
to
love
replace the
them.
battery. It's 6
love
years
them.
old, that
Great.
calculator, and it's never needed a new battery. So and of course you can type moderate obscenities on it like a schoolboy.
Which of course you do.
So yeah, of course, just to check that it still works. So but yeah, so I guess 13 times the invocation price for one of these. Why would you do it versus is it quicker to pass all of that text into a single invocation than to reference the text elsewhere? Does that add some latency? Or
you're talking millisecond times.
But if
really.
you're doing a lot of these, would it be better to have a bigger payload and pass all the text into a single invocation rather than a single invocation that references some text elsewhere?
Debatable. Really, it's debatable because you've still got to process the same amount of data. Okay, you've not had to go off somewhere else and go and get it. But I can't think of anything that is natively going to be sending that much data. So maybe it's a compound effect where you're not having to write it somewhere and then read it from the same place. Maybe that's kind of the use case. But again, I'm struggling to come up with a reason why you'd want to do this.
Probably just like LLM prompts, I think. That's the only use case I can think of. But other than that, even that, let's say, so my use case where like this kind of issue was like trying to pass like car listings to like an LLM, and you could get like a lot of details and get like advanced data. But even that, like, there's nothing guaranteeing you that like it will be like under 1 meg. It could be like 1.1 meg, and then you still need like a claim check pattern or something like that to address that case or expect that it to fail in that case. So that's better, but I don't think that solves the issue. And especially like with the pricing, I don't think it's worth the price. Like if from like a developer perspective, you need to still implement your claim check pattern to account in where it's too big, might as well just like use it all the time and probably will be cheaper in the end. Not much slower either.
Well, there we go. Lambda with 4 times the payload size for 13 times the price, and we're not quite sure why. So
again, though.
On that note, let's move along to our second article for this week, and sticking with the topic of serverless, AWS Step Functions has announced a new metrics dashboard. So, John, Step Functions, I know this is something you also get excited about. Are you excited about the new metrics dashboard?
I would be if I used them in my day job anymore. This is something that I would have very much liked back when I wrote these things outside of janky marketing projects. I would have liked it very much because back when I was doing that, this would have been 3-4 years ago at this point, longer than that even. The visibility into them was not great. The observability into them, which is slightly different, was also not great. You didn't even have the visual representation for express functions back when I was using them in anger. So I like to see improvements in getting data out of the step function service and into the hands of engineers, because they are one of the most powerful orchestration tools in the serverless space that you can use. They're brilliant things, but they've always been very opaque. And any way of kind of peeling back the layers of opacity, I'm all for. I'm not a massive fan of the direct SDK integrations, I will admit. I use some of them, but I think some of them are a bit clunky. This generally is good, though. I like automated dashboards. I like new metrics. I like being able to see these sorts of things. And if you're using these things outside of janky marketing projects where it runs once a week, if you're using these things at actual big proper scale, people like Lego Group and what have you are big users of these because some of their engineers have been on stage at things like summits and reInvents and what have you. And they talk about some of the stuff that they do. And yeah, this is the sort of thing that you need at that scale, because metrics, like, what are they saying? They are available at account and state machine level, which is great. And that's the sort of thing that you really care about. And there's a bunch of new metrics. They only list the one there, and I haven't gone and look at the rest of them. But, more metrics is good. Dashboards is good. It gives you, because you've got more metrics, you can do better alerting. The dashboard doesn't give you that automatically. You still kind of have to build that. But that makes sense because you only want to alert on stuff you care about. Like, you might not care about the new approximate open map run count if you're not using map stacks particularly often. So that's, mileage may vary. But this is good. I like this. It's a nice quality of life improvement if you're using them in anger.
Fabien, are you using them in anger? Is it going to
Or are you
improve
just
your
angry
quality
when
of
you're
life?
using them?
I am actually that's interesting because I have never been using step functions very much. Like the only use case I met was already implemented when I joined the project, and the first thing we did was just get rid of it. The reason why is because it was just Lambda functions at every step, and it was an express workflow as well with we cared about the processing time, and having 14 Lambda functions means that you get 14 cold starts. So your processing time ended up being just very bad compared to just one Lambda functions. I still feel it's a great tool though, if you're using the actual integration. But I never really got to a use case in my daily work where it was actually useful and would have been a good solution. So I don't really know exactly. I can't really say how good it is, but I mean, having more metrics, more observability is always a good thing anyway. Even just having the billing cost on the dashboard, that's pretty useful because if you're not very experienced with that tool or with AWS, you kind of just going blind. You just do your stuff and pray for it not to be too expensive. So I guess having that is quite nice. And also I would assume if you got some retries on that, you can see many more state machines running and be oh, that's something wrong, and maybe you want to investigate, and that's why it gets useful. So yeah, always good to get some observability.
Cool. Well, that is a nice segue into our third article for this week, sticking with the subject of observability loosely. This an article from the AWS Cloud Operations blog about handling sensitive log data using Amazon Cloudwatch. So I'm going to come to you first on this one, Fabien. What are your thoughts on this? Is this something you are experienced with?
I've experienced that. My first thought was just why would they use logging credit cards number as an example in the article? That sounds not the thing you should do anyway. But other than that, it is a super cool tool. And yeah, just the fact that you can just mask it automatically and only allow some users to unmask it. And when they unmask it, you also get visibility on that because it's on the CloudTrail event. So that's from a governance perspective, it's just super nice. And we use it quite a bit with our Lambda functions as well. So basically it's part of our Lambda function construct in CDK that we publish, and it's fairly easy to just integrate either in your landing zones or in your actual shared constructs, and everyone in the company ends up using the same policies to just protect PII, and that's just so easy to implement, and that works pretty great. And it's fine because the only innovation issue is you need to configure it on top of that, but you should anyway configure your log groups because you don't want to have infinite retention most times. So that's not a very massive overhead to implement it, and the wins are just so nice.
Yeah, it's a weird example to use a credit card number because I can't imagine there are many people that are running pet adoption websites that are taking credit card numbers if they're using a payment gateway. So unless you're Stripe or PayPal or someone like WorldPay or someone like that,
Well,
then
you
you're not going to be
occasionally
exposed to that
find
data.
people building their own payment gateways, don't you? And you think, what on earth are you doing that?
Yeah, exactly.
It's just use Stripe, use PayPal, use whoever. Yeah, others exist, but those are the ones I can think off the top of my head. Yeah, it's an interesting one, but they've used that because that's very obviously something that you're going to want to redact. Yeah, but PII, particularly for those of us in or adjacent to the EU that have to abide by the General Data Protection Regulation Register. I forget what the R stands
Regulations.
for. Regulation, the GDPR. then this is something that you do need to care about, okay? Because PII, not PII, it's a lot broader than you think it would be. Email is actually a soft PII because it's meant to only ever be owned by one person. So do you care about masking emails? You could potentially care about having to mask those because maybe third parties have access to your log data for, analytics reasons, right? You might have a third-party analytics firm that you work with, and they shouldn't have any PII. And this way, you don't have to worry about going, oh, hang on, my existing things are logging these bits of PII or soft PII or combined PII, because you can have 2 or 3 things that you can put together to then identify a person. You have to worry about that as well. I've read the GDPR. Can you tell? I did actually read it. So you have to care about these sorts of things. And this service gives you the option to just more or less plug something in to paper over that little problem that you've developed for yourself by not accounting for it up front. Because honestly, people won't have accounted for it up front. They'll have gone, let's just log out everything so that we know what we're doing and we can see everything. And everybody here is behind the curtain. They've all been DBS checked, or they've all been checked, and they're all passing our verifications and all the rest of it. So they're fine, right? And they're all under NDAs because they're staff. Brilliant. And then all of a sudden, you then create yourself a little problem when you want to bring someone else in that's under a different set of regulations. And potentially you have to go through that at a contractual level, but this is much safer because even with contracts, fine, then you have to do that through court systems and all the rest of it, and that's a mess. You're better off just them not seeing it, because if you care about orders per second or those sorts of metrics, you don't really give a toss who is doing those orders if it's just orders per second. You could potentially care about orders per customer per second, and you can have an internal identifier for that, but it doesn't have to be something that's got PII in it. So I like this. Maybe your logging strategy is a little bit iffy if you need it, but generally I like it.
Well, I also like the way your face is frozen on the video stream. I'm sure that's going to go onto the recording. It's a rather an interesting pose that you've adopted there, John. So yeah, still the same. So I don't know if you're having some connectivity issues today, but we can hear you absolutely fine. It's just he's got this wonderful photo of you looking slightly dim, I have to say, but
Kind of looks like an Easter holiday, but nah.
yeah, but I was actually going to ask you, while you're looking like that, this is a perfectly appropriate tangent for me to go off on. Were you channeling your inner Boris Johnson with that pronunciation of PII? Now you have a picture of me instead.
I have no idea. I turned my camera off and back on again, and now I just see nothing. No, I wasn't channeling Boris. I wasn't. Yeah. But if I was channeling Boris, it would have been AI and ChatGPT, because it's just so much fun.
But I thought you got very close to that with your PII that you said there, which is why I thought you were channeling your inner Boris. But it's really putting me off now because your video feed is just showing my my photo, which is very strange. So yeah, I'm not sure what's going on there, but you might want to have a play around with your video settings.
We shall muddle through, and the listeners will have to look at your face instead of mine. And
well, I get 2 of my face. It's like me in stereo or 3D or something like that. So, but yeah. Anyway, we'll muddle on through because I think we're done on handling sensitive log data in Amazon Cloudwatch. So let's talk about the thing that everybody wants to talk about, that we would have been talking about last week if John wasn't on holiday. Just had to bring that up again, didn't I? So
you should have more holidays. It's good for you.
I did wonder when you disappeared from the video feed just now if you'd actually gone on holiday again. But anyway, we would have spoken about this last week because it happened a couple of weeks ago, but there's still loads of press going on about this last week and indeed this week. And of course, it is the major AWS service outage that happened, I think, a couple of Mondays ago, wasn't it? October the 19th, that the big outage occurred. And this is an article from the Register talking about the root cause, which AWS did publish on a post-mortem document, which I don't know if anyone's tried to read it, but it's incredibly dense. It's quite hard to read. There's not much in the way of punctuation or paragraphs. So it's just like a big wall of text, but just go into great detail about what happened in that outage. So the title of the article on the Register is "A Single DNS Race Condition Brought Amazon's Cloud Empire to its Knees." Rather dramatic, as Register headlines often are. Fabian, what are your thoughts on this? Did you try and read the AWS official postmortem article?
I did actually try and read it, mainly because like I was actually on holiday the day it happened, so I didn't really get to see what happened. I was
Going on
out of,
holiday.
I wasn't connected, anything like that, and came back the next morning. You're like, oh, I think I missed something. But yeah, no, I did read the explanation, like the postmortem. It is like quite interesting. Even though like yeah, just very dense. I wonder if like it's even like dense just to deter people from reading it. But yeah, the main takeaway I get from that is just like, I mean, even like the best engineers like working on like this high tech stuff can oversee some like issue and get caught with like this kind of issue. And what kind of struck me as well in that is, so there was like the initial outage, which I mean, it's very easy to miss, like a race condition can happen to like anyone, but it's also like how long it took to just like come back from that, just because like so many retries were happening at the same time. That really reminds you that like you actually should like implement first of all, add some like jitter and like random delay in your retries, maybe like a cap on the move retry as well, and also like reminds me of like patterns like circuit breaker to just like, if you something is down, there's no point like sending requests anyway, just like wait for it to come back. That's definitely like the main takeaway, because I think like they fixed in the postmortem, so they fixed like the main issue in like under 3 hours, but like the outage was like way longer than that, just because.
Yeah, it's basically highlighted how many other AWS services are completely dependent on DynamoDB, which of course was the initial affected service with the DNS race condition, but then it went on, I think, to affect EC2 scaling and provisioning, I think. So I think if you had EC2s running, they were running fine, but if you're trying to provision new EC2s, or auto scaling groups were trying to provision new EC2s, that was problematic. And then I forget what the sort of third major part.
Well,
of
everything
it was.
else would have been a knock-on from not being able to provision EC2s, to be really honest, because vast amounts of services run on top of EC2. Because if you've got a primitive within your own cloud system that gives you really easy to access servers, why would you do anything else? You know, you're not going to go and build your own hypervisor. If someone else has built EC2, just go use that. I think for me, what this highlights more than anything else is that at scale, simple stuff becomes incredibly hard. Yeah, because DNS itself is meant to be DNS is reasonably easy. You have a record and you go and query it. Brilliant. But because AWS is bringing on and off so many things so often that they have to keep the DNS updated really frequently, to the point where they've built their own way of keeping DNS plans up to date, which is baffling. That's the whole. I mean, I don't think at that scale. I don't operate at that scale. For me, DNS is something that I set and then sort of stop thinking about. But AWS operate at such a ridiculous scale that they have to keep rolling DNS updates near constantly, to the extent that they've built and then have it running in triplicate across multiple multiple AZs, and they just stepped on their own toes in this bizarre edge case. Which just, it's a fascinating read if you can get through it. I got about halfway and then my eyes started bleeding and I stopped. So, but as I say, fascinating. And then it shows, one, at scale, easy stuff becomes very hard, and two, how many things, as you say, depend on top of things, which depend on top of things, which depend on top of things.
Yeah, and I think it's potentially a weird irony going on here, because John's having problems. Fabian just dropped off the stream. I'm wondering if Restream is having problems. I don't know if there's something detecting the fact that we're talking about an outage, which is causing an outage on the Restream platform, because we seem to be having quite a few little gremlins today making this recording. But
it knows we're considering replacing it. It knows, and it's fighting back.
yeah. Well, it's doing a better job than the alternative right now, but we'll worry about that later. And then another sort of source of irony, I guess, was the fact that several days later, another cloud provider, Microsoft Azure, also had a major service outage, which the press were very quick to jump on and say that it was AWS again. I guess there were some things on Azure that were pointing to AWS that perhaps made it appear that AWS was also down. But the other outage, was that the same week or the following week, the Azure outage? I forget now.
Following calendar week, but within an elapsed week, I think. I think it was like 5 days later or something, but it was not. I forget exactly, but it was very short. It was very close to it. And I don't know the details of the Azure outage. I'd have to find someone that cares about Microsoft kit, because that's not me. But as you say, it was very, AWS is dead again. Oh, wait, no, it's not. Hang on. What's going on? Oh, it's Microsoft. Yeah, okay, that makes sense.
But I have to say, given that we are an AWS partner, an AWS managed service provider, we didn't really see any impact at all from the outage on our customers. Fabian, were you affected in any way by the outage?
I mean,
oh, Fabian has
It's
gone
been
off the
affected by
stream
that
again. There we go. The irony is just
fantastic.
flowing today, and
That's fantastic.
Bizarrely, this is just weird. It's like me talking to me with a different voice right now. So, let's bring Fabian back in. We said outage, and you disappeared off the stream again. So,
that was immediate, like just got disconnected straight away. No, I just didn't get like that many impacts. Like most of the infrastructure I'm working with were hosted like either like in Ireland or like in London, so didn't get to see much more. I mean, wasn't working that day as well, so did see even less things happening. But from what I've heard, like no major issues. There might be some issues with like authentication incognito at one point, but that's all I've heard. So pretty good resiliency, to be fair.
At Logicata, we noticed two indirect impacts of the AWS outage. The first was uploading memes about the outage to Slack took longer than usual. The file upload time to Slack seemed to be somehow affected.
And they weren't unrolling either. You had to paste them in. You couldn't use Giphy because it didn't work.
So we were not able to be on our top meme game in one of the most memeable scenarios that we'd had for some time. And the other one, of course, was as a user group leader. We were running a meetup last week, and the meetup website was down, or the meetup app was down for an entire day. So I did actually receive an email from someone who wanted to attend our meetup that could not get on the meetup website to join the meetup. So a couple of indirect symptoms of the outage for us, but nothing major. And I think we're not kind of operating at that enterprise scale where the sort of that level of uptime is important. But I think if you look at it in the grand scheme of things, the press love to make a meal out of these things. But actually, the main issue was a couple of hours. Some issues persisted longer than that. But of course,
I forget where I saw it, but I did see someone had done like a 3 nines, 4 nines, 5 nines, whatever, over the past 1 and 5 years. I saw it somewhere on LinkedIn. I forget exactly who, so I'm sorry I can't credit you, but I thought it was brilliant, because if you look at it over the past year, AWS as a whole across 18 regions and 36 availability zones or whatever it happens to be these days, probably more than that, and no idea how many edge nodes, has been something like, it's between 3 and 4 nines of uptime over the last year, and it's between that, or 2 and 3 nines, or 3 and 4 nines, and it's about the same over the past 5 years as well. It's just ridiculously stable. And yeah, as you say, the press absolutely loves to hammer on this one, and the fact that it was US East 1 didn't help, because a lot of global control plane stuff goes through there. But if you were in any of the other 17 regions, you were largely unaffected, unless you were doing stuff and actively needed to make changes that went through global control plane. And I'm thinking various bits of things like IAM and Event Bridge and those sorts of things. You would have been largely unaffected for what I would call a, quote, traditional, end quote, workload.
Yep, absolutely. So, given that we're having problems of our own recording this, I think we should move on to our final article for this week. This is an article on SiliconANGLE, and despite the news of the recent major service outage, Amazon stock has jumped as AWS cloud growth accelerates. So, quarterly results time again. And this article mentions that shares in Amazon.com Inc. Jumped more than 12% in trading. This was on the 30th of October, so a mere 11 days after the major service outage they experienced, and only a couple of days after the announcement of, I think, 14,000 layoffs across Amazon as well. So lots of negative press, followed by some incredibly positive press about how well the business is performing overall in terms of the stock market. So what are your thoughts on this, Fabian?
I mean, my main thought is like, I don't know why like would be such a good like press regarding like all the announcements, but also like I mean, maybe it's also like because we've been focusing on the outage recently, but like there's been like very few outages as well. And I mean, nowadays, like every company has to have some kind of like, maybe not AI, but at least some like digital kind of thing. So I can see why like AWS would be growing. Probably not the only one, that, by the way. But yeah, so that makes sense. They just like having more money in the end. But I wonder also like how much would it be linked to just like announcement in AI with all like the new Bedrock LLMs and all the IP on that? Probably something that investors are going to be, oh yeah, I want to put some money on that because that is the future, whether we like it or not. But we'll see.
Go on, John. I can hear you taking an intake of breath there.
You can't even see. You can't see my thinking face, but you can hear my thinking face.
No, and I can see the ring around my face kind of expanding and contracting as you're making noise. So I know you're about to say something.
Yeah. The why does layoffs and bad press equal stock increases? Layoffs tend to increase share prices in American companies much more than any other, if you look at this historically, because it's a very immediate signal to the markets that margins are going to improve. It's weird because you would think typically, and this is me sitting here from a very traditional British manufacturing mindset. I've worked for manufacturing companies before. I've worked for retailers. I worked for Debenhams when that was still a thing, and I've worked for other manufacturing firms as well, right? And typically, when you hear layoffs and things like that, you think, oh, the company's in trouble. Oh, they're having to downsize and shrink the workforce and reduce headcounts and save money and so on and so on. That's absolutely utterly untrue for American tech companies, because what they've done, this 14,000 layoffs, is they ran out of money in one pot of funny money and needed to pinch it from another pot of funny money. They still have the exact same amount of money, but the budgeting people, the accountants at the top of it, have gone, oh, we need to take money from this pot and put it over there. I need to move some numbers from one of my spreadsheets and put it into another one so I can go and buy more graphics cards because I need more GPUs to do more AI stuff. That's what they actually need to spend the money on. The amount of money is still the same, but what they've done is they've taken it from a cost center and put it into a profit center that has much higher margins. So that's why you tend to see layoffs mean profits go up, which means share prices go up in anticipation of profits going up. It's utterly backwards, but that's how the American markets work. The British markets do it as well, but to a lesser degree, I think. Yeah, I did also used to work in finance, so I sort of understand this a little bit. It's interesting though, because as you say, it shares of Amazon. AWS itself doesn't have, it's not floated in and of its own right. AWS is a limited company owned by Amazon Inc., which is okay, fine, because I'd love to buy shares in AWS rather than Amazon proper, because I don't really want to put any money into the everything shop. And the majority of the money that's being generated for Amazon is coming from AWS. That's very high margin, right? That's very high margin. And that's what the note to the investors or whatever it was said, is that that's where a lot of this is coming from. AWS is growing at a pace that hasn't been seen since 2022, according to Andy Jassy, which is, well, it wasn't that long ago, but okay, it's still growing, which is good. And they are still doubling down and really committing to AI spending, which is what they needed to fire 14,000 people for.
Yeah, well, building out AI infrastructure seems to be the main strategy. We've spoken on previous episodes about all of these major investments that are going into new data centers in various different parts of the world. And it's not a news article that's made it into this week's podcast, but one I saw this morning was the big deal that's just been signed with OpenAI. I don't know if you guys saw that, but I think it's like a $38 billion deal between AWS and OpenAI, where OpenAI is going to use AWS hardware to run OpenAI products or solutions. So,
which is interesting again, because Microsoft is a massive investor in OpenAI. So I don't know what's going on there, because I didn't see that coming. I'd have expected that in Azure Cloud. I wouldn't have expected that in AWS.
Well, I don't know for a fact because I don't have a data to base it on, but my gut feel would be AWS has been investing in all these data centers and they've got the capacity to run it, and Microsoft doesn't, yet. And it's going to take them too long to build it to enable OpenAI to fulfill their plans. So that would be my take on it. But certainly a bit of a guess, really, educated guess. Yeah. So anyway, interesting. As I say, lots of negative press followed by massive amounts of positive press. But I guess you can't argue with the numbers, right? The growth is there, the revenue is there, the capacity is there. The deals are there. Amazon and AWS still a very strong performing business. Just a couple of things I wanted to pick up on, John, that you said. Debenhams is still a thing. It's now just only online. There's no stores in the high street, and of course, I'm sure you're already putting money into the Everything store, just not in investment terms, but
I spend
arrive
disgusting
next day.
amounts of money on that. Yeah.
Yeah, well, you got to make the most of your Prime subscription to get all those free deliveries that are not really free, but already paid for. So there we go. Anyway, on that note, we have reached the end of our time for season 4, episode 41 of Logicast, and we have tried to be consummate professionals throughout, despite the challenges we've had with our recording platform today. I appear to be talking to an image of myself now, and Fabian's been dropping in and out of the stream, but we've kept it going. So if you're listening to this, you'll have no idea what we're talking about because you won't have seen any of it. If you're watching it on YouTube, you will have seen the fun that we've been having, but we've just kept going and we've made it all the way through to the end. So well done us, I think. So thank you, John, for sticking with it, despite the fact that you are hiding behind my avatar. Thank you, Fabian, for joining us and sharing your insights. It's been great to have you on board, and I apologize for our slight technical glitches, but we made it. We made it to the end. It's been a real pleasure to meet you. If you, as a listener or a viewer, have also made it to the end, thank you very much for joining us for season 4, episode 41 of Logicast. Please, if you enjoyed it, do tell your friends, give us a review, subscribe to our YouTube channel. That's all we have for this week. We'll be back next week with another episode of Logicast for you. Until then, thanks for listening and see you again next time. Cheers, guys.
Thank you.